Welcome to Shockey Consulting's Think and Drink Like a Futurist. I'm your host, Sheila Shockey. Today we will talk about how will we navigate life after this bleep, 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 bleep pandemic. We'll have a drink recipe by our resident mixologist, Tyler Waldorf. I'll give a short presentation about some of the core changes that we've seen and how they impact local government to set the stage for our speaker today, Mr. Stephen Arbo. And then we'll have a discussion with our online and in-person participants. Now here's Tyler Waldorf, our resident mixologist, with the Pineapple Madness Martini recipe.
Good afternoon, everyone. This month's drink is the Pineapple Madness Martini. This was selected by Sheila in honor of her favorite holiday, March Madness. Hopefully everybody's bracket isn't as busted as mine. Now, despite the fact that she selected this, I will say that she has a slight allergy to pineapple. So help me keep an eye on her during the presentation, and if it looks like she's throat's swelling shut, let's get out that EpiPen. Okay, so really simple ingredients for this martini. And we start out with 3 parts of pineapple juice. So I'll pour that in here. And then 1 part vodka. And then finish that with 1 part amaretto. And then you just simply shake. And if I can get the top off here. Sorry to those of you here, I get the fancy glass. No garnish today, but in front of you, for those that are here, we do have a fortune cookie for several reasons. 1, the flavors pair nicely with the amaretto. 2, in honor of St. Patrick's Day and the season of luck and good fortune, we have a little fortune for you, and then for kind of the idea of being a futurist, it's a little Chinese proverb for everybody. So with that, cheers to you watching on Zoom. Cheers to you in the room. Happy Friday.
I wanted to kind of share with some of our newcomers. We do have quite a few new people online today from all over the country, so it's kind of fun for us. We have quite a few city managers that are tuning in to hear what you have to say, Steve, so that's awesome. Yeah. But, kind of why think and drink? Why did those 2 things come together? Well, 1, they rhyme, but during the pandemic, which we are talking about today, I started studying a little bit before that futurology, and I was reading a lot of 20th century futurists who predicted this pandemic and some of the ramifications of it. And I really like to talk about futurology because it's imagining positive change through a lens of scientific and history, which I like both of those things. And it helps you to understand the world better and what's ahead. And so the drink part of it came during the lockdown when our staff would have pretty much a daily call in, and we would have different cocktails that we would have different recipes. So we learned a lot about new cocktails and whatnot, and I did drink a lot of new and different cocktails. So we kind of combined to think and drink like a futurist. And the pandemic made it a lot of people want to drink a little bit more, including myself. So, all right. So interestingly enough, on March 11th, 2020, the World Health Organization declared COVID a global pandemic. I didn't really think that much about it until the Catholic Church closed and the NBA stopped. And then I was like, whoa, we got to do something about this. It's crazy. So when the lockdowns began in early 2020, few of us kind of imagined this long road ahead. I really never thought that in 2022, we would still be sitting here kind of thinking about it, watching people in masks and talking about vaccines. But because of variants and other factors, we are still in the midst of this. And we have a regional organization that's been working on kind of helping us to become prepared and really think about the grave consequences of inaction. And so we're fortunate that our region has taken some good advanced steps to really help with that. And as the world stares down year 3 of a crisis that affected so many lives and livelihoods, we're bringing back a look today, but really about how it impacts local governments and schools and other societal kind of anchors to think about where do we go next? How do we take advantage of this change, this disruptor that has occurred? And so, we really think of it that we are still in a pandemic because we're kind of starting to emerge into that Endemic. And so this is a really cool graphic from the McKinsey company, and it talks about how do you know when you're out of the pandemic phase and you're in the endemic phase. And so I feel today like I'm kind of at step one. I don't wear a mask very often. I do if it's required in certain places, and if I go somewhere that has a lot of people in it, I do, but I'm fully vaccinated and boosted. And so my individual behavior is not as much impacted anymore by COVID. So I feel like I'm kind of at step one, and others are not yet. They're really still waiting kind of for that sense of security. And then the second phase really is when COVID exists as a predictable level. I don't think we're really there yet because we don't know what kind of variants are going to happen, but it does not require society-defining interventions then. And that's really, when we get to that point, we'll have another celebration when we get to that point, because that'll be great. And then the final really step is that economic, kind of decoupling the economic activity with the pandemic and the activities of health and safety, right? And so once we kind of have decoupled that, we will really be in the endemic phase. And it'll be much like we think about the flu. This is according to a lot of health experts. Once we get to that point, maybe your committee will be able to slow down a little bit and be able to kind of think about other things that are important to the community. If somebody wants in, we're going to let them in. Okay, so according also, McKinsey and Company also has a really great list of the 10 core lessons. This was just put out March 16th, and they update this every couple of weeks. They're on briefing number 96, and so if you go there, you can kind of see the history of how they thought all of these different lessons learned. And so the first one is that infectious disease is a whole of society issue. And when you think about public health, I've talked with public health officials. They were always very into, kind of these issues, but really did we sit around and think about that much as local government professionals? Probably not. We didn't think about a lot of public health as a whole society issue. Also, I think one of the things that we've benefited medically is the vaccines that have been developed. It's a complete paradigm shift in terms of how they are delivered and what they do inside of your bodies. And so the medical research that was done to quickly address the pandemic, we're all going to benefit from for generations. But conversely, weaknesses in vaccine manufacturing and the equitable distribution of vaccines is going to impact us in the future. So we're fortunate in the United States, we have vaccines readily available to us now, but many countries do not. And that will be a disruptor of economics and of social and environmental issues in the future. And then one of the things I think that we struggle with a lot, and other countries do as well, but trust. Trust is a delicate balance. Who do you trust? How do we respond? How do we know what right information is right? At the beginning of the pandemic, there was a lot of information that was very difficult to kind of understand and weed through. And that's going to impact us in decision making and also in terms of trust with local government and government agencies in the future. I think also what we learned was, I thought one of the coolest things was restaurants. They just adapted like that, right? Many of them did not close. They were able to figure out a way to eat outside, to deliver food, to have takeout. Again, shout out to Dragon Inn, our Chinese fortune cookie. He basically probably made more money than he did pre-pandemic, because so many people were longing for kind of some sort of normalcy. And then one of the other things that we really learned, and I think as a region we benefit from, government policy really matters to both individuals and to the society as a whole. But decisions made by individuals were probably more critical almost than public policy in a lot of ways, because so many people chose to either follow or not follow government policy, which made us a divided society. And then schools really were the kind of the lightning rod of the entire conversation around the pandemic. And really we realized how important some of the changes and shifts in online learning and other delivery systems for education and lifelong learning are needed, and how we need to really advance that in the future to make sure that we're prepared for whatever happens. We also know that work will never be the same. Our company has always worked out of our houses, so it was not anything different to us at all. It really didn't make a big difference. Although we did hire a lot of folks that were new to the company, so that was a challenge, right? So we have new people that don't know our culture, they don't understand our processes, and we're trying to explain that online. Government agencies really, we were working with the City of Blue Summit at the time. They struggled, what are we gonna do? And they were able to pivot and shift to online engagement. We were able to complete our project because of the leadership of the organization. The economic stimulus worked. You cannot go anywhere without talking to a small business owner that said, if we didn't have economic stimulus, we would have went out of business. It would have been very difficult for us to keep all of our employees, which we were able to do during COVID without economic stimulus. And so that was a huge difference in society and kind of government basically transitioning to that, really giving, it's a welfare type of a system, which we were not really used to in terms of business, okay? So that was a huge shift. And then I think the final one, which I really like, is that whether we experience these problems again will really depend on what we do and what leaders like yourself will do in the future to really establish the types of institutions and policies and practices as we move forward. So, with all of that, I've got this really groovy graphic.
Can you see that, Bill?
Yeah. He doesn't have his glasses on, so yeah.
The 1970s, right?
Well, so this is a radar from a group that we use called the Futures platform, and it's used to frame discussions with our clients about the future. We use this in Lee Summit quite a bit. And we identify trends that are most likely to occur and have the biggest impact on that individual community. And these are really global ones that we're kind of looking at here. And this sets the stage for scenario planning, which if you're not already doing scenario planning, I highly encourage you to look at some of these trends and think about what are the strategies as we move forward that would really be good in any scenario, good, bad, pandemic, whatnot. So those are always important. And so really I'll explain to you a little bit how this works. And so this is how they show this online. It's pretty interesting. So the red are the wild cards, and those are always the ones that I like to look at because those are the ones that we really have to think strategically about to figure out how do I make that and take that into an advantage. The further out you are, the larger the change, the further in, the smaller the change in terms of that trend. Almost all of these trends were already happening to society in a pretty rapid way before COVID, but they break it up into these three locations. So the first one up at the top is going to be long lasting from COVID. So these up at the top that are green have a strong signal, and they are going to be long lasting and more long lasting due to COVID. The ones over here on the right got only a short-term boost from COVID-19, but those are still, when you see them in green, those are ones that are going to be here in the future. And then there are some that got weakened more or less due to COVID. And so you think about some of the regulation, things about tourism, also just shopping centers and all the whole retail changes really are a huge impact. I know you're going to talk a little bit about that, so I won't steal your thunder on that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you are. It's something, I'm not sure. And so I just want you to kind of see this, and I'm going to break it into these quadrants and just give you a little bit of background then. Would I go to the next one? Yeah. Okay, good. All right. So when you look at this one, these are the ones that got weakened more or less and were temporarily disrupted. And so tourism was one of them. I cannot wait to go places. I am sick to death of my house. So I am excited to go on any trip that I can, but the borders were really halted as a result of COVID. And also the shared economy, which really cities are starting to benefit a lot more from in terms of people visiting very unique and authentic places such as downtown Overland Park, downtown Lee Summit. Yeah, these are places that people want to go visit, right? And so the shared economy has been disrupted quite a bit due to COVID temporarily. I think those will all come back with vaccine passports and other measures to create more hygiene and personal space. For example, you are breathing air if you're sitting in our offices right now with highly advanced air scrubbers, because when we remodeled this building, we really took a lot of consideration for a healthy building. And that was one of the main drivers for me wanting to purchase my own building. And so I think you're going to see more and more of that in the future. And what's going to happen is more and more innovation. There's going to be more and more government innovation. There's going to be product innovation. There's going to be different services that we've never thought of in the future. And we're going to have to think about what do our citizenry want post-lockdown. So Steve's going to talk a little about that. So these are the ones, if you look on the green ones here, on the outer rim, these are the trends that got a short-term boost and that are strengthening. So we all know that misinformation got worse during COVID. We know that we started consuming a lot more data, and that isolation economy, and this was the one that really cracked me up, exercise prescription. I never got an exercise prescription from my doctor, thank goodness, but the heightened emphasis on physical and mental health is something that we're actually going to talk about at the next month's, the April Think and Drink, is the healthy living and the importance of that for communities. And then this one is a lasting boost, got the long-term lasting boost. So these are other ones we want to focus on. And the one that I think is the most important for most of our clients is the fact that mid-sized cities were hot. Everybody was moving to a mid-sized city before COVID. It only accelerated after COVID or during COVID. And I think that we need to really think about, that's one of the wild card ones. How do we kind of continue that into the future? And also, how do we take advantage of domestic tourism for those authentic places and whatnot into the future? And so when we think about that, this is a graphic that's also from the McKinsey and Company. And what they say here is that, these signals are going to be strong in the future. And this graphic's kind of complex, but they looked at three different factors that are going to be most important for local governments to think about and how they're interconnected, which I think is interesting. And so the lines that are blue we're having a positive impact on each other. So for example, financing capacity, probably until interest rates were just right, we're going to get the race again. We're a positive impact on growth, but also we're having some impact on sustainability as well. And so, so if you look at these, there's really three factors that I think government agencies need to look at. And you always need to start with the end in mind. And we've always thought about that, right? Begin with the end in mind when you're trying to think about what your strategy is. But in the future, because dollars will be more difficult to ascertain for government agencies, we need to think about how to create multiple benefits and how do we do all three of these things at once. So these are kind of the three hot topics probably, right? So without growth, how can we achieve prosperity and well-being for all is really the question we want to ask. And how do we become more sustainable and inclusive economy? These are what we read in all of our professional magazines and in the newspapers. How do we go about growth in a way that's more sustainable and inclusive? And then without inclusion, how do we have a more productive work and life satisfaction for all citizens? And how can we propel growth, but be inclusive at the same time? And then sustainability really is kind of how you bring all three of those things together, that people, prosperity, and planet. And for each dollar that you spend, you have to kind of think about all three of these factors. And so when we think about those trends that we have in the future that will impact us post-COVID, we need to think about how do we achieve these three things with the dollars and the resources that we put in place. And so with that, I'm going to introduce our panelists. I'm going to go with Kenny couldn't be here today, so we've got.
Still looking for a parking spot.
I know, he's probably looking for parking.
It's a damn 3-hour parking.
So Mr. Arbo, he is the city manager of Lee Summit. He's one of our clients. We've been really enjoyed working with Lee Summit over the past couple of years.
Did we pay their bill?
Pay their bill, we love that. Right, he's a respected and local and regional leader that many of you know. He played a critical role in the region's ongoing emergency preparedness work, as I mentioned before, including the COVID-19 pandemic response and recovery. And he's the co-chair of the Regional Homeland Security Coordinating Committee. So with that, I'm going to just turn it over to Mr. Arbo, and he's going to give you some words of wisdom and advice.
Great. Well, thank you. It's good to be here. And speaking of co-chair of the Regional Homeland Security Coordinating Council, I always wondered what the RHSCC stood for. But anyway, that is, I've got my good friend Bill Evil, who is just recently retired from Overland Park as a city manager. So welcome, Bill. You look very relaxed. So, and then I have also got a good friend. Well, all of you are good friends. So, I mean, But we have our folks from Independence. I saw Zach Walker and then Lauren, who works for Mid-America Regional Council. So, but there's some city administrator friends as well. And you say there might be a few city administrator.
There are on our line.
Yeah.
We have folks online that are participating.
Okay, well, wonderful. So I look at this experience that we've been through for the last 2 years, and we may not have completed yet, because this third string is as it's not supposed to be as strong, but it is a threat. But I look at this experience as a change, and if each of you think about your own personal lives, and some of you, like Bill and me, are in our more senior years, and others are younger. But when you think of your personal life, change occurred all through your life, and there were times when changes that occurred that were under your willpower and your decision-making process, and hopefully turned out great. And then there's been some changes for all of us that were not anticipated for us, and they created pain for us. And the truly successful person is able to take that change that is painful and to find a path forward, not letting go of those things that that were important before that change, but finding a path forward that can make them a better person. And so I'm going to use that analogy a little bit about what we should do as a society when it comes to COVID. We did not decide to have a pandemic. It has created change, but we do get to decide on what we will do with that painful experience that we've all went through, and if it's going to be an opportunity for us to be better together and as individuals. So I am rather somewhat of an optimist when it comes to these things, and you're going to hear this in my commentary today. So I think there's really two major themes. My first theme is not indicating that I'm an avid supporter of Joe Biden, President Biden, but these are words that I think are very good to use, and that is building back better. So I'm going to talk about a general theme about building back better. And then I'm also going to talk about the new ways of working. And a lot of my comments will be based upon the experiences that I've had as a city manager, not only for the city of Lee Summit, but for some other communities. So let's start about new ways of working. So we now have the ability to work together and no longer be in the same room when we work together. And that was pretty obscure. That wasn't something that was common before COVID. You would also like to think that it gives us an opportunity for good work-life balance. If you don't actually have to show up or commute to work every day, and you can be on the lake on your boat and be working on emails and listening to music and having a glass of wine and scratching your dog's ears and looking at your lovely spouse, if you have one of those in your life. That's a pretty good outcome, and that might be a good work-life balance. Or you may be able to take off a Wednesday afternoon to see a kid play soccer, and know that when you get back home, you can finish up that paper that needs to be written that's with the deadline for the next day. So work-life balance is becoming more of a blur with that. Now, as optimistic as I am, I also can remember the days when I had, and I'm sure you had, back-to-back Zoom meetings, and they weren't even providing the biological break time between the Zoom meetings. So as you used to be able to walk through the hallway and see people and interact with them. But I think there's an opportunity for us to celebrate work-life balance with this new way of working. The idea of flexible work will also help us attract the best and the brightest. Most recently, we hired an individual that doesn't actually live in Kansas City metro area as an engineer for us. Before the COVID pandemic, we would not even think of of that being possible. Now, that person will need to come in on occasion and be a part of an all-department meeting, but for the most part, this person can be with her family and be in a non-Kansas City metro area. And we were able to attract a very bright individual through that flexibility. So I think that the new ways of working are going to give us an opportunity to consider people that can contribute to our organizations. I'd like to think that we will do the right thing and that we will honor life-work balance and look at this as an opportunity to maybe have better life-work balance. The thing that happened to me on a personal level, I'm going to, and maybe for you all as well. First, I'll have to tell you what we did in the very darkest of days of the pandemic. As far as the city of Lee Summit, we started platooning our workforce. So I had a team A and a team B, and team A would come in on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and then the following week, the Tuesdays and Thursdays, and we flip. And team A's and team B's never interacted with each other. And the thought was when we had not a lot of knowledge about COVID, we thought that would at least preserve maybe at least 50% of our workforce while we were splitting them out. For me, I have two very capable, talented assistant city managers and me. And so what we did, we actually, we did once every 3 weeks, one of us would come in to City Hall and we'd be there the entire week. And then the next person would do that. So once every 3 weeks, I was physically in City Hall for several months. We did this. Now, when I did that, I came into City Hall and these nice people would say good morning to me, and they were my cashiers. Well, my cashiers were there every day, day in, day out. They had to be because you had to have people physically present. My police officers were there on every shift that they were assigned to. My firefighters were there on every shift that they were assigned to. And so in the janitorial staff, actually the janitorial staff, we began realizing how important they were about wiping down all of the doorknobs and going through the bathrooms twice a day instead of once a day and those type of things. So what happened was these people that we call our frontline workers, we realized how much we depend on them for our success. And then, you know, schmucks like me that were able to stay at home and work 2 out of every 3 weeks. You know, I had a whole new level of appreciation after this experience of how much we depend on people that honestly were some of our lowest paid people in my organization. Our cashiers that I mentioned, the 3 ladies that greet people and accept them and take their water bill payment and stuff, they're like next to the lowest pay grade in my city. But yet they were the ones that had to come in every day and expose themselves to being a part of the public world. So I would like to think that we have a different thought about these people that serve the frontline work. I know that we were celebrating the healthcare workers as well. And you can take a look at the folks that work in the nursing homes and the folks that take care of the elderly, and they are one of the lowest paid people in our society, but yet they were required to come every day and to serve us. So I think that we ought to begin thinking about how to treat people better who occupy these jobs, not only through compensation and benefits, but we maybe as a society, we ought to give them a higher level of appreciation than what we have. And I will just say on a personal level, I experienced that by being one of those fortunate white collar professionals that got to be in my home and do my work and hope that there were service oriented people that were in the field helping us still move forward. So that's the first big theme is new ways of working and acknowledging that. My second theme was building back better. So I looked into kind of a hint as how I got through graduate school. So probably never actually wrote a paper on my own. but always looked up other people who wrote good papers and did research, and then borrowed heavily from her work. So, Susan, it's good to see you. She was a year or so behind. Well, I'll just say multiple years. Multiple years behind me at KU. So anyway, don't tell my friends at KU. Okay. But anyway, so I was looking through ICMA the last few days as I was preparing for this. Really great letter that was written by our executive director, I think Eric Otto. Is that right? Did I know? That'd be a good question. Huh? Mark Ott. Mark Ott. And anyway, he asked Richard Florida. So I'm trying to be the futurist here. Richard
I like
Florida.
that. We got this weather for it.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Let's see. No, that's more of a whatever meta. What are they? Meta.
Meta. You're
Meta.
meta.
Meta. So Richard Florida, in speaking to Mark Ott in ICMA, a question that he had posed to those that are in the public sector or have interest in public policy. The question is, will we take the opportunity of this period to build better, more inclusive, healthier, and sustainable communities? So the question from the person like Richard Florida, who really I credit a lot of his thinking in reinventing the urban spaces and even the suburban downtowns, such as Overland Park and Lee Summit. It was a lot of his writing that inspired people to begin that conversation again. But he is asking us as a society, will we take this opportunity to build better communities that lift the quality of life that we have here? And when we talk about building better communities and building better organizations, this could be, well, I look at it that, again, going back to change, and when change occurs, especially when it's not something that you chose to have happen, but you know that things will be different and you do have some impact on how the future will be, you want to keep those things that are very good of your past life. And it is an opportunity to maybe address some of those things that are not as good in your life and as a society. So I do believe that as we begin reinventing how we are going to be post-COVID, that this is a good opportunity for us to look more squarely at racial equity and social justice. And during this entire pandemic, we had the Black Lives Matter, we had the George Floyd incident and many other incidents. And not only were there race issues, but there's been other types of equity concerns and conversations that have occurred in the last few years. And I mentioned about how easy it is to hire, how much easier it will be to hire employees because we have this flexibility with our new technology. But the reverse of that is that employees will also be more able to choose the culture in the organizations where they want to work. And it's not tied down to particularly where they live anymore. So what's going to happen is that if you're an employer or you're engaged in an organization, you will need to decide whether or not you have the right culture to be a welcoming organization for diversity, for people to be their authentic selves in the workplace, whether that's through the network or through being there in person, because employees will have even more flexibility to not have to associate with work cultures that they do not feel comfortable in being, or they can't be their authentic self, and they will find other work cultures where that can occur. And so I don't care where you land on the social equity scale, but if you care about your organization, you're going to need to ask some pretty tough questions. I'm doing it right now with my city. You're going to have to ask some pretty tough questions on, are we doing the right things to make this feel like a welcoming organization? Because if you're not, you're going to be a Passover organization in the future. You won't be successful. Just a quick hit for us. We're actually going through our own self-initiated. We didn't have to wait for a tragic event to occur, but we're going through our own self-initiated diversity and inclusion survey of every one of our employees, asking if they feel comfortable being there and how we can be a better employer for them. That's not patting us on the back, because at the end of the day, we're going to find a lot of stuff that we probably need to do differently, and it's going to be a hard road to make all those changes, but we're going to have awareness of that. And I think as a society and in our culture, and right here in good old United States, I think that we need to be having that conversation of now that we are changing post-pandemic, are we making the right choices for social equity and social justice, racial equity and social justice. Public safety has changed tremendously. What we see, and I know it's not just in Lee Summit, but what we saw during the last 2 years is that our police department and our fire department became more engaged with people on a personal basis. There was more crisis, and it was less of a large trend. We were heavily using co-responders for people who were going through emotional chapters, difficulties. We saw a lot of drug use. We were seeing a lot of dependency on alcohol during this time. So, and we saw a lot of sadness that the COVID probably amplified, that was already underlying with a lot of folks, but the stress of the COVID amplified. So as we move forward with our police department, we currently have a half-cent public safety sales tax that could generate an additional 25% of the operating fund for our police and fire departments could be produced out of the sales tax. So for us, it's an opportunity to think about what the future looks like. And for us, in both our police and the fire department, that tremendous amount of new money that may get approved by the voters on April 5th could allow us to better define the role that the police and the fire department has in the community. And we see things such as paramedicine, where paramedics are actually staying in touch with shut-ins or people that have difficulty remembering which medicines to take on what day and those type of things. We're going to expand, and I want to thank Lauren for helping us get our first co-responder, but we have a mental health professionals that now are on the shifts with our police department, so that when we come across a homeless person or a person that is having mental issues, that we have a trained professional that is helping them. And we want to have that 24/7 for the city of Lee Summit, and that's an opportunity. So as we look ahead, we see the public safety role of still being systematic and still probably answering fire calls and driving the ambulance to wrecks. But we also see that there's going to be more and more time spent on helping those who don't have those others in their life to help them. And there's a lot of individuals out there that are alone and are needing the help, and they're turning more and more to local government for that helping hand. And here's the choice that you have. If you don't provide that help, you will eventually come in contact with them one way or the other, because they're going to either act out or they're going to have health issues or those type of things. So we see it as preventive. And then moving on to other areas that we can build back better is economic changes. We know that we're all creating new environments. I can see it here. I can see it in my downtown. I tell you, the big issue of the day for us is that our nice little merchants in the downtown have decided to put their own chairs and tables out on the sidewalk and to have their own outdoor dining without any kind of conversation with the city. So
we're getting ready to do that,
yeah.
Mayor.
Oh, by the way, greetings, Mayor. It's good to see you here, sir. Mayor Scoop. So we know as a city, I mean, A public works engineer, we've got some fine folks in public works OP here, but a public works engineer, the first response is, we don't want anything in our right of way. You tell them to take it down. So, and instead we're saying, well, let's talk about easements and licenses and what is safe and what is not safe. So we're having to reinvent our public spaces, and going back to the economy is that we're going to have to create ways that people can have experiences and probably more of them outdoors than indoors when possible for that. We're also looking at our shopping centers, and our shopping centers are wanting to reinvent themselves. And our Macy's store has closed in the last month. There is conversations with the people who own our primary shopping centers that have large box retail stores. There is already conversations about reinventing some of those spaces and doing more of the mixed loft concept where we had traditional big box retail shopping center. You know, one of the things we're going to have conversation, I would like to hear from you all about what you think about shared workspace. So, you know, at the time I thought shared workspace will continue to grow and thrive, but then I also know that with the technology and the ease of working at home, and also the fear of health conditions, I'm wondering where shared workspace will come out of all this. So just a couple more points, and I'll finish up here for the conversation. And finally, and it's really interesting that it's an honor to be here and to be asked to be a part of the Shockey Think and Drink event. But the Shockey team to help us with something that we've done traditionally every 10 years. We do a strategic planning process with the city. You all look like you know what a strategic plan is, so I'm not going to go through that. But what we really focus on is making sure that we have engagement with our citizens. And I like to say that we like to engage, not the usual suspects. So I do like to talk to the Chamber of Commerce and the Rotary Club and those folks. But what I really am interested in is that busy mom that has never set foot in City Hall. Or I like to talk to maybe the people that are running a restaurant, and maybe they're immigrants and they have their entire family invested day and night on the restaurant work, and they're never going to be able to take a 7 p.m. Thursday night meeting and spend 2 hours sitting at a round table at a school talking about what they think about the city. So when we got Shockey consulting with us, one of the things that we wanted is a very sincere civic engagement. And then what occurred is COVID happened in the middle of that. And so we had to pivot and find ways of getting engagement and involvement through other means than what we had traditionally. So we can talk about that, but I can see more and more of that happening, of asking how can we get in contact with people in this new world that we have. Be interested in hearing your thoughts about this. I was a little caught off guard. We mentioned a bit about the RHSCC and Mr. Evil's work and my work with talented people. I think really Bill and I'll speak for Bill for a moment. Bill and I, we were just the people that were heading up the meeting, and then the talent and the work and the energy was the people that were around us. And I felt very fortunate to be a part of that team. But one of the things that I want to ask about is, you know, I was really in shock about the public health systems, and that I guess that there wasn't that level of public trust in our public health directors, and that was disappointing in me, in us, that when our public health directors were talking about the need that they had for us to be a healthy community, that was met with a lot of skepticism. And so I see in the future, as we continue to have these public health challenges, I think we need to consciously begin building public trust in our public health system. That means that we need to begin having them more engaged in the public as we move on, and not take it for granted that their wisdom will be heeded, when it's shared with us. So to close up, I'm going to say that, again, change is an opportunity for us. I want us to move ahead, doing our very best to keep what is good, such as today, the opportunity for us to meet each other as friends and strangers and to have common goals of making this a better place for the people that live around us. But I also want to look directly at the challenges, even the ones that existed before COVID, such as equity, and to ask ourselves, is there a way that we can enhance and improve those type of issues as we know we go through the change. So thank you for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you so much. Let's give him a round of applause. We've got, are there any questions or just kind of comments from the audience? Zach?
Steve, you talked about organizational culture and recruiting and retaining talent and work-life balance. What have you said or how have you addressed questions from an elected official or a member of city staff who thinks we're all at home having a pajama party and not
Yeah, so the question was basically, if we are providing this flexibility through technology for people to not have to be physically present in the workspace, and we can make that a advantage for work-life balance. So you do have elected officials that represent the best interests, the interests of the community. And either in their mind or they are hearing from others. And what I would hear often is, when is City Hall going to open up again? How long is City Hall going to be closed? And I would say, well, City Hall is not closed. It's open. People can come in and pay their water bill and things like that. Well, they knew that most of the people that were the professional set in City Hall weren't in City Hall. So, your question is really good. I could repeat it over and over again, Zach. And that is, how do we help the elected official understand that this is the new world for us to be successful as an organization by allowing people to work from home, and that we're still getting good productivity out of that. So I'm working on that.
I was just going to say, no, I don't have an answer, but I think also kind of a follow-up question to that would be other employees. So your frontline workers are in there every day. And, in terms of just, there's always the feeling of, equity and, all employees should be treated the same when in fact the jobs are so different that it's very difficult to do that. And I think trying to get people to think of the bigger picture was very difficult for a lot of people during a lot of local government officials.
Mm-hmm. So Zach, I know you do it as well. I try as kindly as I can to let them know that we are getting the same level of productivity from those people that are working from home. I acknowledge that from their perspective, it doesn't look as good, and if I feel comfortable with them, I might let them know that I think this is going to be the new reality that we all need to work with. Thank you. Yeah.
Any other questions from the audience here? Yeah, we've got a question in the back.
Stephen, you mentioned the shared workspace.
Yes. Yeah, I want to hear from you, Mr. Steiner.
I've got some history in that area, but
Yeah.
I'd just like to ask you, what is your ultimate goal? What do you want to accomplish? Are you thinking of something?
Yeah, well, the reason why I bring that up is that before the pandemic, we had a couple of shared workspace facilities pop up. I was really excited about it. I thought, man, this is a way of building community, and I saw some real synergy where people that were like, you had a graphic arts person over here and you had an insurance agent over here, and the two would talk in the hallway, and next thing you know, the graphic arts person has got a job with the insurance person. Maybe the insurance person's got a new policy. I don't know, but I really like that. And then for our workspaces, they took a hit during COVID, the shared workspaces. So obviously that was, people were not as comfortable interchanging socially in that environment. So my question, I would love to see more of that kind of experience, but I'm wondering if it's practical in the future. With what we do.
I don't really have an answer for you. I guess I'm not a futurist.
No, no,
We're working on it.
But, yeah, a lot of the co-working space that started up here in Kansas City, evolved when Google came back, Google Fiber.
Yeah.
And I was part of that startup community in KCP. But it's evolved, I think. I'm also, personally, I'm a member of Regis. Everybody knows what Regis is. It's a kind of a shared office space environment. There's a location on the plaza, one downtown, but it's a UK-based company. But they're kind of a hybrid co-working space. More of the traditional office, secretary kind of thing, where I worked in a co-working space in San Francisco, and it's organized chaos is what it is. But that's good because you get a lot of the shared ideas, interaction.
I hope it can thrive, but I'm just raising the question: Will it be possible with the health concerns?
Can you tell me how the bridge is doing?
It's coming back. It's coming back. Yeah, but it was scary during COVID.
Well, I'm also active with the Kaufman Foundation and 1 Million Cups, which is every Wednesday at PlexPod, which is it's a lot of co-working spaces. Gerald Smith was it, and he used to run something here on Marshall Drive on Labs, but they're struggling. They have the old Westport Junior High School there. They've converted into office space, which is more like what I've described Regis is, where you have your own office space and you don't have a shared secretary, but you hire that or do it yourself.
Yep, kind of one of the trends is like flexible buildings, so that whatever is the need, that you can accommodate that. And so you were seeing a lot of commercial buildings in terms of residential and a lot of, office space or retail being changed to office and just different things like that. It's pretty interesting. Here, we've got a question over here.
Well, I just wanted to add to the conversation. So I work for the state health department, Kansas Cemetery, but we have decided to move up our lease for the office building, and we will be hybriding. So anyone that's coming in less than 3 days will really just be hotel and some flex space. Get some management supervisors. One of the things where we're struggling with this, how do we, in a hybrid culture, the state and local government, rebuild a connective tissue so that some of those organic work, all kinds of conversations, and the ideation that happens with the interaction, they're kind of to organically grow that. So I think that this culture is really native to state and local governments, and so we're trying to intentionally recreate a teleworking culture, and there's a good blueprint for it, So we're learning to it.
Yeah, I had lunch with a consultant today, and they have a program, for lack of a better term, I'm just going to say that is it's a team building, but it is in the new technology environments, inside organizations, and it's going to focus on individual strengths and team building, but it's going to be done virtually. And so these teams, and that could be the good news, is you could have teams that are cross-departmental, that you can meet on a weekly basis, that you wouldn't have been able to do in a physical arrangement.
Yeah, and we've been doing retreats during COVID that were team building, and that's very difficult to do virtually, but you just have to kind of change your mindset and think of ways to participate to get to know each other better and make it interesting, but very challenging, right? Okay, any other questions from this audience out here, or comments or thoughts? Susan Sherman.
So, building on what they've already said, one of the big things that I think local governments have to continue to do is be the convener. So I think we've seen a lot of projects. People will come to project meetings now online. 100 people will come to a project meeting, which is great. We're getting the information out, but are we reaching everyone we're supposed to be reaching? And how do you hybrid things just like today, where you have some people sitting here and some people online? Because again, those voices that aren't often at these places need to be around the table. And I think that's part of local government's responsibilities of trying to make sure that we're keeping that in mind as technology helps us. Does it also hurt those voices?
Right, I can kind of answer that a little bit from our experience. We had people who have never participated in any sort of conversation about government join your process. We had Walter Denton from O'Fallon, Illinois here. People that never, people on their beds, they got their kids, their dogs. They would have never came to a meeting, as you indicated. And but it is very difficult to do both, the hybrid and the in person. So thinking about offering both is sometimes the best way to do that, but have them separated a little bit so that there's not communication issues and that sort of thing can make it very difficult. And Dennis Inslinger from, Dennis, I'm not sure where you're at now, but he used to be from Johnson County, is online, and he's got a question. So I'm going to answer. Have you implemented hybrid meetings for your M&CC boards and commissions?
For me, yes, we pretty much now, and that's been a good news thing. So our city council, it is very common. We have 8 council members and 1 mayor, and it is typical for us to have 1 or 2 council members hybrid. And it's not the same council members. So it rotates around. So it's helped us out with that. Mayor and city council.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, the hard thing probably is just to kind of remember that you have somebody online that you want to try to get them included in the conversation, and then the technology to make sure everybody can hear and that sort of thing can be difficult. But also there's something to be said about just a face-to-face conversation. We actually found that people were a little too sharing about their opinions, that maybe they would be a little more real than they would be in person, sometimes online. And so that can be a little challenging as a facilitator, but good, but a little too real sometimes. So, yeah.
I might talk about just city hall space for a moment. First of all, if you're a property tax paying individual and lease some, please raise your hand.
No.
Okay.
Anybody online? No.
Okay. So we built our city hall 17 years ago, and we based it upon our growth analysis, population growth analysis, and the number of employees that we currently had at that time for that size of city. And they just did a multiplication out, and they did square footage based upon that. Well, we have significantly overbuilt City Hall for the future needs. And so we're going through a space needs analysis, but what's going to happen is we're going to identify a very sizable portion of City Hall, square footage wise, that is not going to be needed in the future. A lot of has to do with technology, things like that. So we're going to hopefully reinvent that space. It faces 3rd Street, which is a primary corridor. We're going to reinvent that space into retail opportunity or experience opportunity, whatever the future is that gets people to spend money in downtown.
Right.
Well, not whatever, but most appropriate things.
But I think, Steve, that you're lucky that your City Hall is an anchor in your downtown where you're trying to draw people to. So, you're able to kind of use that space in a more creative way. And many cities don't have that opportunity, So that's great. I'm hoping more cinnamon roll places. They have great cinnamon rolls in downtown.
Yeah, neighborhood cafe.
If you haven't been there, so. Any other questions online or in person? How about in person? Anybody else? Anything else you want to share? I'm going to call on our mayor and just say, Mayor, what did you experience during the pandemic? What did you think of in terms of kind of just the big things that you saw, challenges for an elected official?
Well, I think Steve captured a lot of it, right? We started out as a community pretty unified about what is this new thing. that we're faced with. We're scared, we're unsure. How do we face this? Is this going to be as bad as all the horror movies that we watched?
Right, yeah.
And over time, people took different approaches on how we should deal with a common interest, and that's probably been the biggest challenge, I think, for all of us. If you're an elected official or a new mom or whatever role you have at this time, how do we work together to make sure that we keep our community together and our businesses thriving? And we've made it through. Hopefully, this new variant doesn't take us back to have to think about it again. But at the end of the day, I think that it proved that our community can come together and work through challenges, even when they're hard discussions. And so I hope that we as communities learn from that. But it does reinforce the importance of the frontline workers. And when we think of that, we always think of the hospitals, and we think of the nurses and the doctors, the police officers. But I think what this reminded us, think also of the cashier at the grocery store and the janitor, everybody else that are frontline people that we count on that we don't always think about. For me, that's probably the biggest lesson.
I did have a question that somebody emailed me this morning. Kind of what do you see as maybe opportunity or maybe constraints, or kind of the decline in trust in government kind of happening at all at the same time of the Great Resignation and the inability to kind of recruit and fill those positions right now? You talked a little bit about just creating a culture that is attractive to people, but are there other kind of recommendations that you could give about how to, really retain and attract quality people into government right now?
So the first part of the question really is about building public trust in government.
Yeah, kind of building, I think that's, it seems like there's a kind of a decline in the people that come in, do public service and stuff like that now, so. They get paid more somewhere else. So, yeah, makes it difficult.
The thing, I get the honor of meeting every new employee that gets hired in the city. We have a new employee orientation, so I don't meet with them individually, but I meet with them in very small groups. But I thank them for choosing us as a place to do their life work. And then I have a conversation with them about that they are going to get up every day and their work is going to be meaningful and it is going to make a difference to other people's lives. And I just wish that we would celebrate that more. And it may be even more challenging to do if they are off-site and they're working from home and those type of things. But I think that we're just going to have to up the game on letting our employees know that they're making a difference. And there are still people out there and young people coming out of schools that they don't want to work for money. They want to fill their life with something that's meaningful. So I guess we're just going to have to really work hard on trying to find that. And I call it creating new fresh water supply. We talk about this as far as candidates for city council member, and sometimes we get some challenging people that run for council, and people nod their head and say, how in the world are we going to solve this problem? I say, we just need to keep having citizen academies, and we need to start and keep having good people understand that government is a place where they can make a difference. And that's kind of an easy answer. I don't have a solution, but I'd say we've got to just keep working on getting fresh supply of people that have a public servant heart to be a part of the organization.
Yeah, and kind of you're saying the challenge is that they're not having direct impact with the community as much because they're working remote. It's a little bit more difficult.
It does.
Yeah. Other questions or thoughts or comments? Yeah, Ken.
Steve, you mentioned you hired a staff person who's not local.
Yeah.
Is there much pushback? Was it a long path to get to the point of hiring someone who's local?
Well, it was a senior staff engineer with a PE, and we cannot, nor can Overland Park or really any other municipality can compete against the private sector when it comes to salaries and things like that. So when we found this individual that was very talented and committed, and now we have a kind of a work from home process, we could make it all fit together. So, and otherwise, if we told this person, no, you need to be here Monday through Friday every week, it wouldn't have worked. So very happy about that.
And you mentioned it was a female. Do you feel like that might bring more women into the kind of technical STEM type of?
I told him I don't want any screaming kids on the screen when they're in the
I've heard your dog bark, so I don't know. And mine.
Yeah.
I do think one of the things that's been kind of interesting, and we kind of experienced that, is you kind of got to, you get on the call early and you get to kind of see where people live and a little bit about their families, and you're kind of talking about, I'm bored, and, it kind of gave people more of a excitement about, there's somebody I can talk to, I'm trapped in my house, so it's kind of, it was interesting to see. I feel like I got to know people better in a lot of ways because people were more open because they were bored. So
I went to the used bookstore and I got all the highfalutin sounding books that I could buy and found them stacked behind.
Oh, okay. That's great. You have a cute dog, so that's good. All right. Any other questions or thoughts about kind of what's next for us in terms of local government or schools or our community? Anything else? April.
So kind of coattailing off of that, hiring people to work within your city that may live outside of your city. I think something really interesting happening with cities is like, how do we draw people into our community that aren't necessarily needing to work here? So how do you draw people in just through their interest and not because they're forced to be there through work? So I don't know if you could just talk about anything Summit is doing or any terms you've seen in regards to how you're attracting new residents beyond through employment.
Oh,
She's your parks project manager right now, so I think that's what she's trying to do.
okay. So how do we draw people into the city of Lee Summit to live or visit or?
Yeah, just because, so many people have to live somewhere because that's where they work. And so say a bunch of people now can work remotely and are wanting to work remotely, how do you get them to pick your community to live in?
So, there's so much that I'd love to brag about Lee Summit. I could do it very easily, but I'll just do this one. I think Lee Summit has done an outstanding job on our branding. Our branding is yours truly, and people will say, well, what the heck is yours truly? But yours truly is how people, when we used to write letters to each other, would sign yours truly, and that meant that they were authentically or sincerely indebted to you and they want to keep a relationship with you. So to answer your question, what we take pride in Lee Summit is the way that we treat each other as neighbors, even if you're a first-time visitor in our community. So my answer to your question would be that we brand what we celebrate and what makes us a great community. And we promote that and pay for media coverage and anything that we can get so that people who have the same values that we do would want to come to our city. And that's what we've done in the past. And we got a significant amount of day drivers, one tank trips. We're not a national destination. We're probably not even a regional destination, but we are a place where people from Omaha and Des Moines and St. Louis and folks will come over to visit with us and to get that experience.
And for those of you that are online, stop at the Hair Museum in Independence on your way over to Summit. That's amazing.
Oh, I think Independence is best known for the world headquarters of the Parliamentarian Society.
Oh, wow. Okay. I do think people are kind of looking for more kind of quirky things to do, and there's so many cities have those types of fun things to stop and visit with, so. Any other questions anybody has or comments that they'd like to share?
The
Bill
senior,
Evil.
the emeritus.
Co-chair of the,
So I want to go back to the notion of public health,
Yes.
which is something that you and I talked about many times.
Surprise me.
The trust in public health officials,
Yeah.
we found out that they were inadequately resourced to receive an incident like this. And so how would you, Steve, go about ensuring in the future that public health departments are as needed as public safety departments
Yeah.
when the time arises? So what are your thoughts about how we would do that?
Well, I would, not like I have an answer, but to reflect upon that, I would say that we have at this moment in time, we enjoy a high level of public trust between the city of Lee Summit and the citizens of Lee Summit. I've had 3 tax issues where we've either increased your taxes or had a use tax, and not one single time did I have to say, if you vote for this, these things will be purchased, this program will be implemented. All I had to say, we had to say, was this is important for us to continue to serving you. Please vote. Well, we can't say vote yes. We would just say,
please vote.
Please vote. And we were successful, and I know that is a sense of public trust that's there. If we weren't a city that had public trust, I'd have to say you will be guaranteed to have these things occur in that first 5 years of this vote, and we didn't have to do that. I think we need to find a way. I think that our public health department organizations either didn't know the importance of public trust or they just assumed it was there, but we were horribly wrong on that, horribly wrong. And if there is a moment that we don't have a public health crisis, I think that we need to, even if we have to hire a public trust building firm to do that, we need for them to put energy into how do we connect with the public? What steps can we take to build trust in these individuals? Because absent that, we certainly know there's a lot of negative messaging out there that just fills the void for them. Yeah, but that really was the most surprising part I think for my work with Bill, is that all these public health directors, when the COVID came, I was like, okay, well, you guys need to team up, get out there and tell us what to do. And either they weren't ready to do it because that's not what they were hired to do. They were scientists and they didn't want to get out in front of the public, or they had governing bodies that they answered to that wasn't going to support them.
And I guess I don't know, my experience is mostly with Topeka and Johnson County, but it's kind of always been like public health has always been something for people who can't afford health insurance or can't afford it. So it's kind of like you don't have a lot of connections to them until something like this happens. And so maybe their mission needs to be a little bit broader than kind of dealing with the underserved, because they really do deal with all of us.
Everybody loves the police department and the fire department, right? Everybody loves the firefighter. So that's because you see them. You see them, and you see on Channel 5 News at 10 o'clock, and they save the child from the burning building and stuff. But boy, they don't cover the health department about the disease.
Great things that they've done, yeah. Well, and nobody really wants to be a public health official when they grow up, but they might want to be. I mean, until now, right, Dr. Bell? So maybe we've changed that a little bit. So maybe we've changed that, right?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, we've got to cover
Very
it
under-resourced, and it's very non-glamorous career until
now.
But there isn't also a dedicated pipeline of workforce for the health.
Sure.
So that's part of, STEM careers in K-12, education, and you don't think about paying for stuff you don't see sanitary pads. You don't see lung lawn testers, lead paint abatement,
Yeah.
but you do see firefighters. So I think
Yes,
part of it is marketing.
Right.
Yeah.
But also
Maybe more
connection-
permission served.
Yeah, connection to the schools,
Yeah.
right?
Mental
Yeah.
health, yeah.
Mhm. Okay, any other comments or questions anybody has? Keep it online. All right, well, I would like to thank Steve for participating in our process today and all of you for doing that. I'm going to tell you what our next session is. Our next session, next month, now we're gonna do it a month later because I'm going skiing, so I'm not gonna be here. Or a week later.
Bring a
So-
GoPro. So we can
yeah,
watch it.
okay, I will. I'll live stream. You won't want to see that. I'll be falling down probably. But our next is going to be about how cities are really prioritizing healthy living, and that's both physical and mental health. And so we're going to have some presenters about that. And that's going to be Friday, April 22nd from 3:30 to 5. It'll be in person and online. And so I hope that you can participate in that. And so a round of applause for Steve and everyone else who participated today.